Welcome to another episode of Cape Ann Today. We are speaking today with the former Poet Laureate of Gloucester, John Ronan, and Christy Rosso, who is the Children's Librarian at Sawyer Free Library. Thanks you guys for being here.
Nice to be here with you, Heather and Kory.
And we are talking about Poetry Without Paper, which apparently is celebrating its 20th anniversary. All that poetry in the city of Gloucester, who knew, right? And John, you are one of the founding members of this, the creators of this event. Do you want to start right off by telling us what it's about and why you started it 20 years ago?
Well, sure. 20 years ago, I was on the Lyceum Committee, and David McCardle was the library director at the time. And we came up with an idea of having a poetry contest open to all Gloucester students. And I'm a poet, and I was always pushing that on the Lyceum Committee, much to their chagrin at times. But David liked the idea, and I liked the idea. We sold it to the committee, which was not a foregone conclusion, because 20 years ago, or when we planned it 22 years ago, the social media and the cell phones, smartphones, that's ancient history, and we were not anywhere near where we are right now. So we didn't know if it would take off or not, but it did. And there are now many of these types of contests in the country. So we started and put it into effect in 2003. So this will be the 20th contest, and it's going very, very well. And I want to say Christy Rosso has been absolutely important. She's very humble about what she does, but she's the only person now who's on the staff who's directly involved with the contest, and she's really been keeping it alive over the last number of years.
And she showed us the giant stacks of poetry, the 20 years worth of poetry. So, and this is for all levels of education in the public schools, right? Elementary and middle and high school?
Yes, right up to seniors in high school.
Yeah.
So John, tell us about the level of enthusiasm over these 20 years. Has it waxed, waned? I know like poetry slams became really popular maybe 10 years ago. We had Amanda Gorman reading at the inauguration a couple of years ago. Is poetry back? Did it never leave? How's that going?
Well, like everything, there's been ups and downs. Of course, we're just getting over right now the most serious down, the COVID woe crisis, which saw really diminished entries and also messed up our awards program early in the summer. We had to do it in Zoom last time, and it doesn't work with about 30 kids who have participated, because we give awards to the first, second, third, and to honorable mention. So that's a lot of student poets. And Christy can speak to the fact that there's enthusiasm, but the enthusiasm rises and falls.
Yeah, so Christy, I did want to ask too, how many submissions are you usually dealing with? What's the library's involvement? Are there presentations at the library afterwards?
That's right. There can be several hundred or more people who would submit poetry. And usually we have the award ceremony in our main area, our main floor at the library. And it's very well attended by family, friends, and also teachers. And it's usually a very warm and friendly ceremony where kids read the poems that have won the awards, and everyone loves hearing that. We've had many, many comments about how much they enjoy hearing the winning poets read what they've submitted.
There's something like so touching about the fact that kids are still loving writing poetry, that they're in that at that award ceremony and they're enjoying reading their poems. Their families are excited about it. Is there something, Christy, about poetry in children that you think really works?
I think it offers them an opportunity to express joy and happiness, as well as other types of feelings. And sometimes the poems can be on the dark side as well as on the light side. And that's where I think poetry really gives them the freedom to speak to some of those feelings and let them out in I guess an appropriate way. And family I think are sometimes surprised by the way that children are so eloquent in sharing those feelings through poetry.
And John, I was going to ask, in your years of doing this, have there been a student poet or two where the words leapt off the page like this student has something? We know everyone has something to say, but has there been something like special?
Well, there have been, and I want to say over the years, many of those. There's at least a couple, 3, 4 maybe, even though they might not all be first place poems, they kind of jump out. It's not a cliche. It's not trite. It's fresh, and often, as Christy said, it's often about topics you don't think of as kid topics. You know, it's not the beach. It's not going to the Red Sox. It's not playing frisbee. It might be something like the parents' divorce or depression or bullying. Real adult topics treated in adult ways. It's really surprised me many times. Still does. It surprised me a couple times this year already.
And people can read these poems, right? Over the years.
Can read them.
You can go onto the Sawyer Free Library website and have access to these poems over the years, right? I was doing some wonderful browsing there early this morning, going back over the years of the winners and reading their poetry. It was really, it was a lovely way to spend a rainy spring morning.
Yeah, I also want to add that the Gloucester Poet Laureate website has a list of all the student poets who have won over the years, first place winners, and all the first place poems from the beginning to just last year.
So this is going on through April 30th, right? And students are still submitting. And then just sort of walk us through that process up until the night of the presentation.
Is that to me or Christy? I think Christy handles the mechanics.
Okay.
The hands-on kind of mechanics. I think she's maybe the point person on that question.
Yeah, please do, Christy.
Well, after we've and actually during the time that the submissions are coming in, John is the judge, so he's already beginning to review the submissions as they come in and kind of looking them over and beginning to sort of sift through them. But actually until the end of April, everyone has a chance to submit 3 poems. And then when the contest closes, the judging for the final winners actually begins. And John will review all of those poems. And then he carefully decides who will win the prizes. And there are 3 prizes in each category. So the elementary and middle and high school will all receive awards in first, second, and third place. And then there are honorable mentions. And so John makes those decisions and then he lets me know about those. And then it's my job to inform the winners and let them know when the award ceremony will take place. And this year it's June 9th. And that award ceremony, as we mentioned, is at the library. And then we will award the prizes that evening. So it gives us a time for him to make the decisions and for us to then get everything ready and get the prizes in order for the winners.
John, that's a lot of work.
Well, I space it out.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious of doing a good job because I'm doing it for the first full year. This year, we had a wonderful gentleman by the name of Dick Sloan who judged it for many years, did a wonderful job. He very sadly and suddenly passed away in the middle of the process last year. So I took over, but this is the first full year. So I pace myself. I do 10, sometimes 15 poems at a stretch, but I don't want to get too glazed over. So I leave and then come back later and do 10 more. We're at about 200 entries this year so far.
Oh.
So
I haven't checked today. Maybe there's another,
Yeah, right.
might be another 100 in there.
You can hear the emails dinging in the background. Yeah.
Yeah.
So has this become a rite of spring for Gloucester?
I think so. Yeah, it is. It certainly is for me. And I know for Christy in the library, I look forward to it. And, you know, hockey teams that win and are very successful get a ride around the city on fire trucks sometimes. I'd like to see that for poets one day. Maybe not this year, but soon.
That would be great.
That's a great idea. And so how are students participating? Is this all done within the schools? Is there a web link where people can find on the web, on a Sawyer Free site to participate?
I think
Christy?
for Christy,
Another one for you. Yeah.
He's the one.
Yes, you can find it on the
He's at headquarters.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
The Sawyer Free Library has a website for it, and there are also helpful links if you need help about getting started. And also in the schools, the teachers are very happy to help. It's National Poetry Month, so also there are websites available for kids online, and you can find a lot of help there from places like the National Poetry Society, where there are lots of helpful helpful links there too, because there are many poets, and there is a lot of poetry for kids that I think are very inspiring.
So, you know what else I want to ask about the students is, are the submissions coming from the students who have an acumen for writing and a taste for writing, or are you being surprised by what some of the students who are making submissions? Have you noticed that at all, John?
You mean
So it's not necessarily the kids in writing class who are submitting poem, but of sort of all backgrounds and talents and whatnot.
there are a lot of poems that come in as the product of assignments, especially at O'Malley, where there are some wonderful, wonderful writers and some very enthusiastic teachers who we get most of our entries. Majority of our entries are from O'Malley School, and there. This is sort of like your question earlier, Kory. I think are there kids that just jump out because they are talented, and there are kids. We're not looking, for future Nobel Prize laureates. We're looking for people that want to think and notice and take care with language, and all that's important in poetry. But if they learn that, it carries over to everything else. It's pretty much what we call thinking, and it's good.
Yeah, well said.
And an inspired teacher really helps that, I think, right? So if the teacher loves poetry and understands how children can access that or find ways to access their feelings through poetry, I think that's a really successful link in life.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so we are also supposed to remind our viewers that we have a podcast. So this conversation can be listened to on all your favorite podcast platforms.
You can take John and Christy wherever you go today if you want to listen to. Keep them in your pocket. Yeah.
While you're doing dishes, while you're driving around, listen to the Cape Ann Today podcast on poetry.
Too cold for the beach, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thanks so much for your time, John and Chris. We really appreciate it. And again, this is running through April 30th. So there's still time to submit at sawyerfreelibrary.org. And then we'll have to get in touch with you and figure out, how we can help for the June 9th presentation too.
And we'd like to hear some of these poems. We want kids to come on and read their poems for us.
That sounds like a great idea.
So let's do that.
Yeah, it is a good idea.
We don't have a fire truck, but we have.
Heather's got a big Jeep. We'll fit as many as we can in there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having
me. Thank you for
your time.
And thanks for poetry.
Thank you.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.